Let me love in a holy, holy way. So that very moment that you're about to say something that you're going to regret, here comes that song playing in your head. Let me love in a holy, holy way. And let me live in a holy way. So that then, what a beautiful opportunity to stop and say, what would be the most loving thing to say in this moment? So songs help us to practice our consciousness. Welcome to Palm Sunday. In the tradition I grew up in, Palm Sunday was a big deal. Sometimes we got palm fronds when we went to church. But we're doing two things today. We're doing our Palm Sunday service, and we're completing our 6-week, it turned out to be, celebration of Brene Brown's book, Braving the Wilderness. So we're doing a little bit of both. I love how synchronicity works in life, because the story of Jesus coming into Jerusalem and the ideas that Brene Brown holds in her book just come together so beautifully. The chapter title is Strong Back, Soft Front, Wild Heart. And Mindy talked last week about wild hearts, the whispers of our wild hearts. But think about how often in life you really need to have a strong back, and how it's sometimes difficult to hold a soft front while we're having a strong back. But when our back is supporting us, when we're actually engaging in what I call love with the spine, and we're living that way, then it's easy to keep our hearts open and our spines flexible. I want you to think about Jesus for a moment. The story of Jesus coming into Jerusalem is told in 4 different Gospels, and here's your citations for them: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They're a little bit different if you read them, but what is really fascinating to me is that in all of them, Jesus is coming into Jerusalem. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it's the first time Jesus is coming into Jerusalem since he was there as a 12-year-old and Mary and Joseph forgot him. We have to remember it's a little bit different. It's not like he's in the back seat of the car. Oops, what happened to Yeshua? Instead, they traveled in caravans, and it would be easy to think, oh, he's hanging out with his cousin, or he's with John, his cousin John, or he's with his aunt and uncle. And so they get several miles down the road and they discover he's not there. And so they go back to Jerusalem, and where do they find him? Exactly where one might expect. He's in the temple. He's studying with the rabbis. So can't you imagine Jesus as a 12-year-old boy? He's sitting and he's studying with the rabbis and he's answering questions. Because Jesus knew who he was at that point. And so he knew who he was, and he's having these conversations with these rabbis. So Matthew, Mark, and Luke say it's the first time he's been back. John says he's been traveling back and forth. But think about it for a moment from this perspective. Jesus is on a donkey. Now he's on a donkey because he's told 2 of his disciples, hey, go over to this particular place, and there will be a donkey that's waiting. Take it. And if somebody says anything to you, tell them who it's for, and they will say, okay, take it. So the disciples go over there, and there's a donkey, and they take the donkey. And somebody says, hey, what are you doing with my donkey? And the disciples say, I'm taking it to Jesus. He's going to ride on it into Jerusalem. And the man says, okay, go ahead, take my donkey. And so the disciples bring it back, and Jesus gets on a donkey. Well, the donkey would be a commoner ride. It's the ride of somebody who's working, who would be considered an ordinary people. Because you got to remember, in Jewish and Roman culture both, there were hierarchies. So here's Jesus coming in. It'd be kind of like me driving in my old jalopy, driving into this big thing. Well, what's happening is tons of people have come to celebrate Jesus. They're singing, Hosanna, the Son of David has arrived. Blessed be the Son of God. Because they're very excited to see him. Because just a few days before, Jesus had raised Lazarus from the dead. And so people wanted to see Jesus. They wanted to see this man who'd been engaging in all the miracles. We've heard about many of them. The healings that he's done, the turning water into wine. the changing fishes and loaves, and now he's raised Lazarus from the dead. And reportedly, Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. Mary and Martha, you may remember them in the story. They're the ones who argued about whether they should be sitting at the feet of Jesus or in the kitchen doing the dishes. The kinds of things that we worry about regularly. Am I doing the right thing? What is somebody thinking about me? So Jesus is coming in on a donkey, and people are shouting and they're praising him. And he's following the path that he knows he is supposed to be following. And in this moment, he's also knowing that in a few days, these very same people who are excited about him, who want to see him, who want to be in his presence, will be the very people who are standing on another hill in Jerusalem yelling, "Crucify him, crucify him." Can you imagine what it would be like to be able to have that strong back and the soft heart of knowing that the very person who in this moment loves you will be the very person who's going to criticize you in that moment, and yet be open and present and available? That takes some skill. That takes knowing who we are in our power, in our purpose. It takes knowing who we are and to live the passion of who we are called to be, no matter what anybody else thinks about us. That's a difficult challenge for many of us who recognize our spirituality but live in this human form. But yet Jesus recognized the wholeness of himself. And Jesus recognized that he and the Father were of one heart and one mind. And if you have a difficult time with the Father, put God or source energy or whatever you want in there. I had a great relationship with my Father, so that one's easy for me. But sometimes people don't, so just put a different term in there. But in this instance, the word means Papa, someone that we're close to, someone that we have this heartfelt connection with. So Papa and I are one. Just think about that for a moment. He is standing in the knowingness of how deeply loved he is. Even in the midst of this adoration, it doesn't have to affect him. And in the midst of the condemnation, it does not have to affect him because he knew who he was. He knew his power, that power of the oneness with his Papa, his Father, God, whatever term you want to put on that. Jesus never defined God in the Gospels, but what he did was he lived as he understood the principles of God to be. He healed the sick. He was a wisdom teacher. He brought new ideas into the culture. Some people really liked him and some people really didn't. And yet he taught what he believed to be true. And he acted in ways that he believed true. Jesus healed people on what the Jews considered to be the Sabbath day. Got himself in some trouble for it from the Pharisees, but he knew that that was the right thing to do. That the healing was more important than the day of the week that it was happening on. So he was willing to step forth and live his beliefs, actually to live beyond his beliefs, to live his knowingness, that he and God were of one heart and one mind. And Jesus taught love over and over and over. And I want you, before I go to that, Jesus did teach love over and over and over. But as Jesus was coming into Jerusalem, it was the fulfillment of a prophecy. And the prophecy is found in Zechariah, and it says, "Shout and cheer, daughter Zion. Raise the roof, daughter Jerusalem. Your king is coming, a good king who makes all things right, a humble king riding a donkey, a mere colt of a donkey." I've had it with war. No more chariots in Ephraim. No more war horses in Jerusalem. No more swords and spears and bows and arrows. This king will offer peace to the nations, a peaceful rule worldwide, from the four winds to the seven seas. So here's people who have been in captivity for many, many years, believing that Jesus is going to take them out of captivity, that he's going to rule like a human ruler would rule, that he's going to somehow overthrow the Roman government and to start a new government where he resides. That's the thinking of the people. And Jesus knew that he was establishing a kingdom, but he knew that that kingdom was in consciousness. And that consciousness came from the fact that he and the Father were one. And in that knowingness, what Jesus taught was love. And I want you to see the verse as I read it to you. Matthew tells us from Jesus' teaching, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all of your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment. So this is the greatest thing to do, to love God with our full being. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. All of the law, which in that term would be the Torah, all of the law and the prophets, Zechariah, hang on these two commandments. So really what Jesus was saying is everything that you've learned, because he's talking to a bunch of people who have been in a Jewish culture, everything you have learned hangs on this love, this quality, this connection, this vibration of love, and how we do it. Now in the Bible there are 1,000 plus reflections of love. And the Bible's not talking about Valentine's Day kind of love. And the Bible's not talking about brave-hearted, courageous kind of love. The Bible is talking about the fact that as a whole being, created in the image of and in the likeness of God, we are already in our wholeness. So we love God with everything that we are. In the wholeness, in the depths of our very personality, is the truth of us, which is our wholeness. And across the Hebrew and Christian scriptures, this is shown. And I want to give you a few examples. In Deuteronomy, serve the Lord your God with all your heart. So another way to say that is serve the Lord your God with all of your beingness, with your whole being, with your passion, with your intelligence, with your excitement, with your heart. I will give thanks to the Lord with my whole heart. So when we come to share gratitude with each other for things in our lives, we do it from a wholehearted place with our whole beingness. Trust the Lord with all of your heart. Sometimes this is the hardest one for me. Trust. Because in my humanness, I have had many people betray trust toward me. And when I take that personally, when I forget who I am, when I forget that I'm already a whole being, then I worry that maybe I did something wrong, or I worry that maybe I'm not good enough. But when I stand in the truth of me, knowing that God and I are one, that that's who I am, that my whole being is already whole, there's no imperfection in it except for that I see, then I can trust the Lord with all my heart. And then in Jeremiah, one of the prophets, I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts. I will write it in their whole being. I will put my law, I will put the knowing of principle, I will put the knowing that they are already whole within them. And so when we have that longing for something bigger than us, when we have that longing for that deep connection with another person, then what we're doing is we're expressing the truth of ourselves. We're expressing that godness that we are. We're expressing our divine nature. But we don't always know how to do that. Because many things have occurred in our lives, and sometimes from those occurrences we have learned how to put armor on our heart, so our heart is not soft any longer. And then we have a hard back, and we have a hard heart. But what's beautiful is that love allows us to soften our hearts. Have you ever been really mad and somebody just allows you to be? And what happens in those moments? Nobody's trying to tell you stop being mad. Or I used to grow up with somebody saying, go to your room if you're going to be mad. But somebody just says it's okay to be exactly as you are, what you're feeling. And there's a gift in that. And when we encourage each other to move through those feelings in ways that allow them to move on through us, there's a gift in that. And what happens is we begin to open up our hearts. Now, when our hearts are closed, and you may be recognizing some of these things, we don't see very clearly. Something happens and we're mad, and so we think that it's this, that, or another, and we get our knickers in a knot. Our ears don't work as well. We miss things. When our hearts are hardened, it's easier to be mean to each other. It's easier actually to go on the continuum so that violence occurs. But you know, on the other side, when we go down to a milder form of this, when we're judging ourselves, we're actually engaging in a very mild form of violence. When we're judging each other, we're engaging in a mild form of violence. And we don't want to look at that. I don't want to look at that. I don't want to think that this is a level at which I'm violent, because it doesn't look like this over here. But when I'm willing to open up to the fact that any interaction I'm having with another person is also interacting with a part of myself, because not only are we one with God, but we're one with each other. And when we're willing to hold those heart connections and do the work, whether it's in prayer or meditation, or whether it's somebody else saying, tell me more, because you're feeling what you're feeling, or holding us when we're sad and crying, when somebody is there for us, it opens our hearts. Now, how do you know if your heart's closed? Well, if you're standing in the grocery store and you're looking around and you're thinking, I wish these people would move faster, then that tells you something. Your heart is closed. If you're feeling the need to honk at somebody in traffic, then your heart is closed. But what a wonderful opportunity to come home to love in a holy way. To come back and go, wow, I have these moments of life within me. What am I going to do with these very precious moments of life? What appreciation can I have? Or maybe I look around and there's somebody sitting there in the grocery store, they're at the tables in Harris Teeter and they're not looking too happy. I can simply send love. Or I could pass through there and smile. Or I could walk past and say, I was just noticing you, I want to tell you I really like your shirt. Or I want to have a moment of connection with you. We build these walls so often that keep us feeling separated. The beauty of Jesus is that he knew that he and the Father are one. The beauty of us is we can have the knowing of our oneness, or we can have the separation, that sense of separation that we may feel. And when we feel separate, our hearts are closed. But when we feel that oneness, our hearts cannot be anything but open. So learning how to engage in the spiritual practice that holds our hearts open. The Father and I are one. I and God are of one heart and one mind. That means I and you are of one heart and one mind. That means we are in this together in a consciousness of love. For God cannot be anything other than love. We have the free will to be something other than love. But God can be nothing other than love. So in that deepest part of ourselves, in the deepest part of us, there is a yearning and a longing to be the truth of ourselves, to be love, and to share it in the world. And all we have to do is know it. It will radiate forth from you. Have you ever met somebody that you always felt so much better in their presence? They don't have to tell you how wonderful they are. They are just being wonderful. Can you imagine what it's like to be in the presence of Jesus? Wow. He'd be riding high all the time, feeling that goodness because he radiated it. We have that same capacity for radiating that exact kind of love. The question is, are we doing it? We have it within us. And I believe that as we come together on Sunday mornings, that's what we're coming for, is to learn how to be love with each other with all of our differences, how to bump up against those differences, how to bump up against some ways in which maybe I don't like what you just said, but how can I open my heart anyway and be love? How can I think, let me love in a holy way in this moment where I'm going like, but how do I breathe out and exhale and love in that holy way? Thomas Merton says, life is simple. We are living in a world that is absolutely transparent and God is shining through it all the time. That's always present. That shiny, sparkly love is always available to us. The real question is, am I open to it? Is my heart open or is my heart closed? What am I choosing? And we always have the choice. So if you're interested in living a little bit differently than you are, or maybe you're already living this, and let's keep living more of it, do more of it, is say with me these affirmations together. I am one with God in heart and mind. I live my life fully with an open heart. I live my life fully with an open heart. The next time you want to do your snack turtle thing, just take a moment and think, I want to live my life fully with an open heart. And I'm actually talking to the Christ presence. I'm talking to somebody's divine nature. So think about it. Do you think Jesus would go like, ooh, I wonder if I should have said that? No? Can you imagine? Oh wow, maybe I shouldn't have worn this today as I ride on my donkey. We do these things to ourselves, and we're taught to love our neighbors ourselves, and so we love in the same way that we love ourselves. So when we're willing to recognize our own wholeness, to release anything in us that we perceive as not to be whole, and we don't even have to do anything but focus on our own wholeness, then it's simply anything that's unlike wholeness will simply fall away. And when I'm mad at somebody, I can remember I can love them in a holy way. And I can share my feeling and listen to what their feeling is. I can share my sadness and listen to it. I can share my anger and hear what comes back at me. And so often when we share anger, we sort of brace ourselves for something else. But when somebody is standing in their wholeness, quite often they'll say, thank you for letting me know. Thank you for letting me know, because now I know what's going on inside of you. What a gift we give each other when we share authentically, when we recognize who we are. Are you willing to open up your hearts? Let's sing about that. And I'm going to invite you as we sing our way into meditation. We're singing a song called I Am Opening. Sing it for yourself today. Allow yourself to notice how frequently you're living in that open-heartedness. And if you want more of it, simply do more of what allows you to do it. Do more of what you love and less of what you don't love. So that each day you're excited to get up and be alive. You're excited for the unfolding of the day and what's going to happen and who you're going to see. So sing this for yourself.
See
open in whatever way. I always think of my heart having hands and just throwing them wide open in a place that I love. Allowing the energy of myself and the connection and the harmony between nature and me, between another person and myself, to be the channel, the vessel of love flowing through. Think about all of the times in your life as you do a mini life review where joy has abounded, where you felt that deep connection, that wholeness of yourself in connection with another person. Makes my heart smile when I think about that. Think about the times when someone was kind to you, when you were feeling your heart was closed. And instead of being met with a closed heart, you were met with an open heart. And that open heart allowed you to open your heart. Hearts open wide. Swing wide those doors and know that it is about love and it is about life. And it is about moving through each day in our divine nature, which is joy. And it is about knowing that we are indeed beloved expressions of God whose purpose is to learn to love, to recognize our oneness with God in heart and mind, and our oneness with each other in the very same way. So bring these thoughts and ideas, these moments, these images into the sacred and holy silence. Just listen for a moment to these words. You are a work of heart. Work of heart, of love. And say in your mind to yourself, I am a work of heart. I'm a brilliant light for all to see. I am a light. Jesus called us the light of the world. I'm in that place where heaven and earth meet, and I have the possibility and the capacity to bring harmony to any environment, any situation, any moment that I am in when I choose to see my wholeness in the wholeness of another, and I live from the consciousness of love. And when we do that, we glow. So let yourself imagine yourself simply aglow with love. For you are a work of heart. You are a masterpiece. For you are one with the one who created you. Let yourself breathe into that in this moment. Feeling it fill your beings. Notice what happens with your heart. Does it open wide?